There must be something wrong with me, guys, because after I watched Gunpowder Milkshake, the first thing I thought of was, I could really go for a milkshake right now. You know what? I'm gonna call my doctor. Yeah, there's something wrong there. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review of a film that I've been anticipating for quite some time. Netflix's Gunpowder Milkshake. Yes, it does stream this week, actually, July 14th on Netflix, and I think it has a limited theatrical run, but don't quote me on that, guys. It seems to be like it's popping up in some theaters around here in my area, but man, I've been so excited for this movie since I saw the trailer. And a huge thank you to Netflix for giving me the chance to watch this early for review. The movie is directed by Navot Papushado, and it's starring Karen Gillian, Carla Gugino, and Angela Bassett. And there are a lot more names that I didn't read there, guys. This is a really stellar ensemble cast, and you throw them in an action movie like this, could it be a recipe for success? Now I'll answer that and so much more, but before we get into my review, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I talk about movies and TV early like this all the time. So if you don't want to miss out, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and help us get to 5,000 subscribers. Tap on that bell and hit that thumbs up button if you're a big fan of Karen Gillian, and go ahead and get loud in the comments down below and let me know, guys, are you checking the movie out this weekend? And if you already have seen it, what did you think? Because I might be in the minority with the way I'm feeling about this film. Alrighty, y'all. Well, you know what? Let's get into what the movie's about and start off with the positives. The movie surrounds an assassin named Sam who veers off mission to rescue a child and unknowingly triggers a war with a powerful crime syndicate named The Firm. Oh, and there's this sisterhood as well of gun-wielding assassins that come and basically put up a fight against this large group of men and mob bosses. It's so much fun to witness, but you know what, guys, let's go ahead and get into what works in this film. And it starts with the fact that this is a very stylish action movie that aesthetically is really impressive. I love the neon colors here, guys, the blues, the pinks, the reds. It's so vibrant, it's bright, and you really get a good sense of that, especially in the first fight where Sam goes to the bowling alley to fight off some goons. And guys, it just looks so good, and it is really pleasing to the eyes. I also thought the cinematography by Michael Saracen, who also shot War for the Planet of the Apes, was really unique. I loved how some of the angles were different, and it helped this movie stand apart from other action films that we've already seen this year. I mean, there's even a split diopter lens that's used that is sometimes good and sometimes overused, but for the most part, I love how they just swung for the fences and they just let everything out there, and they didn't leave anything off the table, to be honest with you guys. There was a lot that was used here, and I thought for the most part it was successful. There's also this booming soundtrack whenever a fight begins, and there's an awesome mariachi themed score used. It really does complement that hand-to-hand combat and a lot of the gunfighting that we see as the film goes on. And to be honest, guys, I do like using some songs in certain moments. I mean, the way that they were using the classic rock and roll songs here that I was nodding my head to, and then I thought, you know, this does add a different sense to an action movie where I was expecting to hear the punches being thrown and the bullets falling to the ground, but instead we get this rocking soundtrack, and honestly sometimes I really found myself enjoying it. But the star of the show here, guys, really is Karen Gillian, who does a great job as Sam, our lead assassin in the film. I've been a Karen Gillian fan for quite some time now, and it was just great to see her assume this role as our action hero, and she really is, as a character, devoid of a lot of emotion after handling a lot of jobs for the firm. And boy, let me tell you, she does well to portray little hints of emotion throughout the movie. Her eyes and the littlest of expressions just makes a world of difference. Oh, and I just enjoyed seeing her kick a lot of butt because, man, there were some moves she threw in here. I'm like, Lord, I never want to run into Karen Gillian if she is upset. And her teaming up with some amazing actresses was also a joy to witness. You have Angela Bassett, Lena Headey, Carla Gugino, Michelle Yeoh, and quite possibly her most effective co-star, Chloe Coleman. Which honestly brings me to my next point. Chloe Coleman plays an orphan named Emily, and her teaming up with Sam in this movie was the most important part of the film for me because it added a very different story beat and a very needed story beat for this film. I honestly loved Chloe Coleman when I saw her in My Spy, and it's no surprise that she's a part of the best story thread in this entire film. When Sam and Emily are basically forced together by fate to go and try and survive this onslaught from the firm, it is really cool, and I found myself vibing with this part of the story the most. If it was just Emily and Sam and no one else, I think this film would have been maybe even better. But I do think that the movie does have some layers to it, and that's because of this subplot. The bond that they form is really special. There's even a parallel between both characters and their childhoods, and honestly, I just love their moments together too in the midst of action. There's a car sequence that they're involved in when they leave a medical office, and Boy, you're gonna have to see it to believe it, but man, it's one of the most fun scenes of the year. It is just so cool to see both of them work together, and I do think it was well shot and, more importantly, well acted. And when it comes to the action itself, there were some very different set pieces. And I mean that in a good way, guys, because director Navot Papushado creates challenging scenarios for Sam, Emily, and all the other ladies, and for the most part, he's hitting the mark for most of the darts he throws at the board. Some misses, but I would say that after that midway point, he gets a lot of hits. And seeing a lot of the action either in slow-mo or some nice one-shots was pretty refreshing as well, because like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of style and grace to this film. And if you can watch this on a big screen with big sound, it is a treat in and of itself. And there are some intricate set pieces too, where the characters play with their environment well, and that comes in the third act, honestly, in the library. I was pretty impressed, guys. I thought that was a really cool moment, and that's when I think the film really was flowing well. And I will tell you that after the first act, this movie finds its footing and delivers on what I was hoping to get after watching the trailer, for the most part. And I say for the most part because, guys, here's where I think I'm in the minority. I didn't walk away from Gunpowder Milkshake loving this film, and that's due in large part to that incredibly rocky opening act. For the first 30 minutes, there were a ton of issues, and I felt that this movie wasn't as entertaining as it could have been. It was scratching the surface, and I understood that, so I was patient. But after a while, there were a lot of problems I found in that first act that lingered throughout the rest of the film. Not only did the action feel less than impactful in the beginning, but there was a very thin script here overall, guys, and the dialogue served to our actors is really forced. There are a lot of conversations in this movie, guys, and I did not buy into most of that dialogue, and they give some of the worst one-dimensional lines to an absolute legend, Angela Bassett. She plays one of the assassins, and honestly, she deserved so much better, and I also couldn't care for most of the moments in between the action. The story itself really is not as compelling, and the world building here is pretty surface level for the most part, so it just doesn't give you anything to really sink your teeth into. Oh, and when it comes to the humor, it doesn't work well for me. Let's just say there's a running joke with laughing gas here that made me do anything but laugh. And I really didn't like the fact that this movie barely gave any foundation to our leading ladies here. I mean, that's who you're featuring on the posters, in the trailers, and that's really what makes the movie work, but they're barely in the movie together. We go long stretches of time without Carla Gugino, Angela Bassett, and Michelle Yeoh, and honestly I was wondering why we were getting so much Paul Giamatti in the beginning anyway. And then when they do use these leading ladies, I feel like there's not a lot of emotion here, and they try to force that to you, and we didn't spend enough time to really build that connection. And I thought to myself, alright, well, okay, I understand what's going on, but I'm not feeling anything for this moment because unfortunately we just didn't get enough time with them on screen. And for as great as the action set pieces can be in this movie, guys, the tension itself is sometimes squandered by that overbearing soundtrack we talked about. This movie is definitely style over substance, and like I said earlier, even though the soundtrack has some bangers on it, I do feel like it was used a little too much in that third act, where when we get to that penultimate action scene, I could hardly hear the punches being thrown. I could hardly hear any of the action, and honestly it was just the soundtrack, and after a while that kind of took me out of the scene because it felt more like a glorified music video sometimes, and I just did not want to see that. I'd rather actually hear the soundtrack a little bit, but more importantly, I want to feel the punches being thrown. I want to hear them land, and unfortunately we didn't get much of that. Basically, less is more sometimes in these action films, and this movie sometimes tries to do way too much in terms of style. And don't get me started about Ralph Ineson, who is an excellent actor, and I thought, you know, he could be used in a good way here, and they introduced him early on, but to be honest, he's very misused, and they could have probably just casted anyone in that role. So overall, you guys, Gunpowder Milkshake is a very middle-of-the-road action film that has a lot of promise, and it does have great style, substance, and a very capable leading lady in Karen Gillian, but all of the pieces don't come together to fit in a perfect picture. What we got here for me were a lot of hit and misses, and I do think that this film has a lot of potential, and I know a lot of people already love it. I'm seeing my fellow film critics, and I just know that this film is going to be adored on Netflix this week and weekend. It's going to have some legs, but I just don't know if this movie delivers enough to separate it from just being another action movie. There are times when it does, between Sam and Emily. Listen, Chloe Coleman and Karen Gillian are great. I would have loved to just see an action movie about those those two surviving for 2 hours. But instead, the movie tries to give you a little bit more, and it doesn't do a good job at executing. And when you add a really poor script to all of this, guys, I just don't necessarily think that this film did as much as it could have with the talent that it has. But no, I don't think that if you throw it on this weekend, you will be upset. It's definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of any or all of the actors in this film. But if you're looking for something that maybe is a very unique action movie that will separate itself from the crowd this year, that's not the expectation you should have going into Gunpowder Milkshake. So if I had to rate it, guys, it definitely would get that 3-star out of 5 for me. Again, it is a middle of the road action movie, but it had so much promise. So there you have it, you guys. That's my real review of Gunpowder Milkshake, a movie that makes me want a milkshake. But you know what I want more than that? Your comments down below. Let me know what you think about this film when you see it. Did you like it? Do you agree with me? Or do you disagree with me? And who was your favorite character throughout the film? And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below. Subscribe to the channel and tap on that bell, y'all, because we got a busy week ahead. Space Jam, iCarly, Fear Street Part 3. It's gonna get really scary in this piece. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. And I'm getting a milkshake. Who's open this late?